Andrew is the founder of Praxis Leadership and a thought leader in the rising field of Neuroleadership. You're going to learn way more about that today. A discipline blending neuroscience, leadership development to build healthier, high-performing workplace cultures.
I want to start off by saying that personality is not a reliable predictor of leadership. Personality is not a reliable predictor. So in terms of the big five, your viewers might be familiar with ocean. Pressure is an outside force, a situation, and is frankly up for debate.
Welcome to the Tyler Dickerhoof Show with me, your host, Tyler Dickerhoof. On today's episode, I'm joined by Andrew Geesbreght. Andrew is the founder of Praxis Leadership and a thought leader in the rising field of Neuroleadership. You're going to learn way more about that today. A discipline blending neuroscience, leadership development to build healthier, high-performing workplace cultures. Andrew, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. Excited to be here.
So let's start this off, like this idea of neuroscience, like from a brain's perspective, is there actually like a difference between leaders that get it and those that don't? Like science, like all of that. Is there a difference?
Well, it's interesting you ask it like that. I want to start off by saying that personality is not a reliable predictor of leadership. Personality is not a reliable predictor. So in terms of the big five, your viewers might be familiar with OCEAN. Stands for openness, neuroticism, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Conscientiousness, excuse me, I messed up OCEAN. Some of the research has revealed that high extroversion and low neuroticism influence these factors. So this is traditionally what we look for when we look for leaders. But emerging research is saying that it doesn't matter what mix or blend you have of these five factors, you can be a leader. It's about optimizing the traits that you already have. So that's really, really important. And I think that's one of the myths, is that you've got to be really, really, really extroverted to be a leader. Or in this case, the people who nerd out on this say you've got to have low neuroticism in order to be a great leader. It's just simply not true. Overall, leadership does start in the brain. I don't think we'd be on this show if I'm not breaking any news there. It does start in the brain. Definitional leadership is the ability to influence others towards a common goal. It's another obvious statement. But if we break that down, what does that really mean? We have to create meaning and purpose for others, which fuel awareness to act. So there's got to be a sense of urgency if you're going to get people to rally around what you want. Obviously, develop a plan with strategy and tactics. So you outline a path so you know what you're doing, and then execute the plan. So the motivation to sustain effort. Now, I want to mention that if you're leading yourself, all these rules and standards and skills apply, but they're 10x or 5x. They're even more important when you're trying to galvanize a team. Mm-hmm. And then one that might not be as focused on, but continual learning and adapting when things fail. So the adjustments that need to be made. And I think that all of these are skills, different skills. Each one of those that I mentioned are different skills, and they each require practice. And all those skills are brain-based, or they're brain-based. They start in the brain. But I do want to ask you, Tyler, really quickly, can you predict leadership potential? So, and if so, what are you looking for? Because I'm fascinated by that. It's like, can science predict leadership potential? My first question is, do we think we can already? Like, what do you look for if you're looking for a leader?
Man, I would say no, but then I would say this. I can almost pinpoint why it doesn't work.
Okay.
And for me, that is all when, it's when we are, like you talked a little bit about, this idea of what works, what doesn't work. What doesn't work is when we're overwhelmed by our insecurities. We try to mask them. We try to almost overpower them. When you talked about this idea of just a leader can be anything, just owning what they are. Right. If you refuse to do that, you will not lead and will not lead well. That's right. That's when I look at different, political leaders to organizational leaders to conversations I had just before this with, talking with people, what they're dealing with in their organization. And whenever there's a problem, it is rife with some show of insecurity. And, it's a fear that is showing up as insecurity. So I would, again, can't say that, that determines leader or not. No, but I can tell you what absolutely destroys leadership and prevents the ability to authentically lead.
I think that's a fantastic answer. And now I'm partners with my brother, Alex, and he wrote a book called The Chaos Parallel, and it is all about insecurities. The whole book is about acknowledging and not letting these insecurities have life-altering effects. It's exactly what you just said.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Can't wait to read it because my upcoming book is about how those insecurities determine how we show up as leaders and what to do to move forward. And so it's interesting you share that. I can't wait to, read it, reference it. But I think
what's the name of your book, Tyler?
So it's in the outline phase right now.
Okay,
it's due to be published next year. So
let me know so I can read it.
Yet. Yeah.
Let me know when it comes out. I want to read it.
I will. But let's move forward and kind of this idea of, again, brains and the neuroscience and the, how our brains are wired to protect, right? And avoid, harm or seek reward. Like, how does that really determine how leaders lead?
Yeah, it's another fantastic question. So the brain constantly scans our environment for threat, and this is based on survival. And when a threat is perceived, the sympathetic nervous system is activated, and this triggers what almost everyone has heard of is fight, flight, or freeze. And today's leaders aren't often subjected to physical threats. So these come in the form of social and emotional threats, like social rejection or loss of status. This is how that kind of operates in practice. But then there's also reward seeking, which you intimated at. The brain also seeks out rewards when we achieve a reward. Dopamine is released. That's sort of a buzzword for non-neuroscientists now. We just throw around dopamine like we know what it is. But it's released, and this creates a feeling of satisfaction and pleasure, and of course reinforces the behavior, increasing the likelihood of repeating that behavior. But the fundamental question here is, what state do we need to be in to set ourselves up for good decision making? That's a really, really important question. So are we better when we're calm, or are we better when we're stressed? Now, if you were to do like a family feud, ask 100 people, you might have 50 people say, well, I'm better when I'm calm. You might have another 50 that, based on their experience or their perception of their experience, is that I'm better when I'm stressed. So we need to differentiate between pressure and stress, though, because stress is an actual physiological state where certain hormones are controlling us. Pressure is an outside force, a situation, and is frankly up for debate. What you and I might view as pressure might be different. But the science tells us that we are better at decision-making when we're calm. That part is not up for debate. Because we can access more of our frontal lobe and be more rational, think, and problem solve. Some refer to the threat response as a mental hijack. And this is when we're unable to be at our best. So the science is pretty clear. Again, the family feud study might reveal some split opinions on it, but the neuroscience is pretty clear. We're better at making decisions when we're in a state of calm.
Well, I love that you interject that kind of the difference between stress and pressure, because I would say that when you look at whether it's elite performers, athletes, to military, to, any type of, call it stressful situations, the ones that perform the best are the ones that have trained to embrace that pressure and make, the best decisions in that situation and not respond to stress. They've actually conditioned for the pressure, where, you go into a situation, you talk to Navy SEALs, and man, it could be an absolute horrible situation, and their heart rate is actually pretty minimal because they've trained for it so much. They're just autonomous in making decisions.
I mean, it's exactly right, Tyler. If you think about a stand-up comedian in a sellout crowd of 20,000 people, someone like you or me or the average person might say, that's incredible pressure. And yet a seasoned stand-up comedian would say, there's no pressure at all. the situation is exactly the same, but one has trained and one has not.
All right. So can we go down this rabbit hole a little bit more? From a neuroscience point of view, is it preparation that helps embrace pressure and mitigate stress, or do you think it's a different mechanism?
Are you asking, Tyler, if we are born with it, or
Not necessarily that. It's just kind of like you're talking about pressure and stress, right? And this
okay, yeah,
idea
yeah.
that if we're talking about pressure and stress, is what happens neurologically, or what do you think
Mhm.
happens that allows people to move from stress to pressure? Is it just preparation, or do you think there's something else, you know, from a neuroscience point of view that gets there?
I see what you're saying. So the preparation, I would put that in the skill set bucket.
Okay.
And to just
Okay.
use this same exact analogy, someone who is a trained stand-up comedian is obviously prepared. But
Yeah.
what I think we're going to add to the ingredient pool is a mindset. So if someone stays in a state of threat, it's how they're viewing the situation. So the perception of the situation might be threatening, not only because they lack skill, but also because their mindset, their outlook of the situation is that this is dangerous, and this is a situation where I can fail, where I might look bad. Whereas a leader or someone that's developed mastery over time, they might look at a situation that might be threatening to you and me and say, this is a chance for me to learn, to be challenged, and to grow. And so I'm not as worried about my reputation or how I look, but I'm going to embrace
Yeah.
this moment in this
Yeah.
situation. So
Yeah.
I would say it's both. I would say it's a mindset and an actual skill, and something that can be prepared.
That's so interesting, and I love, as far as talking about mindset and the idea whether it's a fixed or growth mindset, and kind of this idea of I can embrace a stressful situation as a place to look more at it as a pressure as opposed to stress. It's causing difficulty, and
Right.
I think that's probably the difference between leaders that love to lead when the stakes are high, as opposed to ones that are just like, I'd rather keep the boat straight in calm water.
That's exactly right. And again, I hate to be hammer and nail here,
Yeah.
but it really does depend on the stakes are high is relative to how it's viewed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so when a leader is able to stay calm, one of the reasons might be because they're not viewing as the stakes as all or nothing.
So let me take a step back. Like, how did you decide to get into, you had a previous, career with your family, everything else. And now all of a sudden you've
Mhm.
kind of gone into, Praxis leadership, this kind of main discipline. Like, what really got you to the point, like, that's where I want to go after?
Mhm. Man, Tyler, I truly wish that I had like a singular powerful story to share. I really do. Like I just popped out of bed and, did a home alone and put my hands on my face. But it really was multiple events and moments. You referenced my brother and I got the band back together for Prax, but previously we had a successful medical scribe business that we scaled and ultimately sold. And that was a really empowering experience, very difficult experience. But after that, that 10-year run, I was 39, I'm 45 now. I was 39 and I had this professional existential crisis, uh, thinking like I've got a lot more to give. Like what now? Do I want to continue
Hmm.
to work inside of businesses, or do I want to work on hearts and minds? And I was always drawn to hearts and minds, and I just never really had an opportunity to work in that way. And so that crisis led to Prax because I wanted to be on the other side of the table. I was already successful at running a business. And yet when I kind of leaned back in my chair, I was like, man, people drive performance, but who's driving people? And so that's really what intrigued me. So I went back and at the ripe age of 40 and got my master's in psychology, and now I'm about a year away from getting my PhD in psychology, which is helping us at Prax and dive into the literature. And of course, the neuroscience subset is really what
Yeah.
intrigues me because we're the conductor of our behavior, and it all starts in the brain. So there's a lot of things, Tyler, but it was really a decision of where I wanted to contribute moving forward.
Yeah.
and Prax was the what was birthed out of that.
Yeah.
But I just continue to learn, and this may sound trite, but to stay humble, there's so much I don't know, and I just have a thirst for knowledge, and even preparing for your viewers in your interview, there's things that I learned, and
Yeah.
it's just so much fun. And you wouldn't be doing this podcast if you didn't have that mindset as well.
I'm excited to learn. I'm excited to, share with people, but also there's a part of me is the learning means that, um, how can I see it differently? And even though we can be on the same pathway, it's like, oh, okay, that either helps me further understand deeper. And it's kind of like this idea of, like, for me, long held empathy was the solution to insecurity. It was this
Mm,
idea of, like, I have to, but even the definition of empathy, whether you go to Brene Brown or so many others, like, oh, put yourself in their shoes. I'm like, that doesn't feel real good. Like,
right.
my feet might be the same size shoes as you, might not be. And so I
Mm,
needed to find different that was more actionable. I describe it as putting your arms around someone and walking with them, because it required vulnerability and realizing, oh no, the way to, like, really get to people, to connect with people,
mm,
is be authentically vulnerable. And I kind
mhm.
of looked at that as I had to get out of my head and into my heart. And I think so often, even though we're talking about neuroscience and leadership, I wonder,
Yeah,
is there a point to really embrace empathy and emotional intelligence that
yeah.
we need to move from our head to our heart? Is that,
Well,
kind of this idea of, like, moving from one spot to the other?
I I want to mention uh, it's a little bit of a, I wouldn't say it's unpopular, but it's challenging common knowledge. It's a book called Against Empathy, and it was written
Okay.
by a
Yeah.
Harvard author.
I,
Have you read it?
yeah. I started reading it. I don't know if I got 100% the way through it, because it kind of got like, all right, where's this going? Kind of got off the
Right,
rails,
right,
in my
right.
experience, but it was like, okay,
It's
interesting.
a little bit of a head scratcher, and I want to answer your question more directly, but
Yeah.
I would say the value in that book, and you could probably get just as much out of it by reading the Google one paragraph. But
Yeah.
his premise is that too much empathy can actually lead you away from good decision making,
Yeah.
and I find that as an interesting thought. But to answer your question directly, I am not a fan of the term emotional intelligence, and that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's more accurate to just say intelligence, because we can't really separate rational cognitive thought from emotional thought. They're very blended and they're very overlapping. But if someone wants to nitpick, having intelligent emotions, I think, is a great way to think about it, because it puts us in
Mm.
in the driver's seat. Whereas emotional intelligence feels more fixed. You either have it or you don't. But I do want to say this, Tyler, that emotions are not the same as feelings. Emotions are
Mm. Okay.
physiological reactions to stimuli, and they hit extremely fast. So, in 1/16th of a second, my emotions will react and prime my body for action. And this is before my conscious brain can catch up, before I can sort of make sense, and the thought train starts rolling. My adrenaline and cortisol are likely to surge. My eyes might dilate. Blood pressure increases. My sympathetic nervous system is doing its job. But after a few seconds, though, there will be several cognitive gating events. And this is me trying to make sense of what just happened. And this is when my thoughts start to race. And if here's the thing, if I don't perform any reframing, I will need to match my emotions to my feelings. And this is called response coherence. So something bad just happened and it made me feel bad. So I must then defend myself. So if I don't reframe, that's just the automatic formula that occurs. And that's a popular concept now. You hear the word reframing. It's not widely understood what it is, but that's why it's so important. Because if you don't stop that train from happening, then it will be the same automatic response every single time. And what's happening in this situation that I'm bringing up is called an emotional profile. And this is how our good management of the intensity and duration of our emotions is. So, what does skillful regulation look like? Well, we got to use our emotions as strategic tools and not allow them to sabotage our efforts. So, we can experience the highs and reduce the lows. So, I think the punchline to all of this is that emotional intelligence can be learned and can be developed. We're not victim to how we feel all of the time.
So if someone were to say, "Oh, I can master my emotions," is that just
Okay.
meaning that they can, you know, become, a Zen master, or is it more of like, no, you've understood that reframing?
I think that's a much better way of saying it. The reason why I chuckled is like, have you ever played someone who's incredible at chess? Like, just absolutely incredible at chess. They're thinking on a level that we can't see all those moves ahead. The masters in any field typically don't view themselves as masters. And the reason why is that they know what they don't know. There's a
Yeah,
humility
yeah,
with it.
yeah,
There's a
yeah, yeah.
continued curiosity. So I think it's probably not accurate to say that we can master our emotions. I like the way you put it. And I'll say it again because I think it's worth repeating, is that we can have increasingly more intelligent emotions because
Mhm.
we can reframe them. We don't have to just, ooh, that's how I felt. Therefore, that's what the truth is. Well, that's certainly not true.
Well, I think, as I think of some of the stuff that I've figured out, the framework that I try to walk through is that the reframing of our mindsets and beliefs are really what kind of change our response to our
Yeah.
insecurities. So again,
Okay.
it's this whole emotional response. If I feel, my insecurities living out, then all of a sudden it's like, no, I need to reframe my mindsets and beliefs. As you've just shared with us, is kind of like I can have that emotion that, oh man, I'm not, you know, worthy enough. I don't have value. I'm not enough,
Right.
whatever. And it's like, oh, well, what's driving that emotion? How am I feeling about that? Instead of like, no, that's not the situation. I can be vulnerable. I can own it and say, hey, this is how I
Right.
feel. And, that is strength as opposed to hiding it in, burying it, like you said, and creating the emotion, the response from a feeling point of view to that emotion. And that's what, in my opinion, undoes everything.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think if you can't embrace reality and you can't be objective about what you are sensing and feeling, then how could you possibly coach yourself if you're already starting from a spot that is unrealistic or off center? It would be like, Tyler, if I asked you for feedback and you shared something with me that I didn't like, but was helpful, I would be a fool not to listen to that. And I would say that people that have really demonstrated high skill with emotional regulation, they're able to coach themselves through this painful reality.
I would even extend that. I don't think you can effectively coach others if you can't do that yourself.
I can completely agree, which is why I have said that self leadership is not only the foundation; it's the cornerstone of
Yeah.
leadership.
Yeah.
If you can't lead yourself, how dare you lead others?
And yet we see people do it all the
I know.
time, all day long. Or we have organizations where they're like, oh, you're a great performer. Let's put you in leadership. But it's like,
Yeah,
but do the avenues that you performed well, was that a display of good self leadership and communal leadership? Or was it just like, man, I'm, hiding everything till I can perform well. And then all of a sudden, when you're leading others, it gets exposed. And then all the, I would say the train wrecks occur because it starts to show up. I'm like, oh, that's not how you lead people.
yeah, that's right. That's a classic confusion: technical competence with leadership effectiveness. They're not the same thing.
Well, and it ruins a culture. It,
Mhm.
it really starts to then when that, again, when we focus on this emotion to feelings and like how it affects others and, going back to stress, it's like, man, if we don't handle that well, and even if it's just a minute, I don't have the answers, right? And
Right.
that vulnerable strength, if we don't handle that well, man, it wreaks havoc in an organization, is what I've seen. Would you agree with that? And like, how does that, how do you think that affects other people's, psychology?
Well, we would need a whole nother hour on this, but I will say, I will say that if a leader is unable to self-regulate, they can't walk in to work and they haven't taken care of their body and their mind, then that will be toxically felt across the organization. And again, not breaking
Yeah.
any news there, but when I talk to organizations about self leadership, for those who haven't arrived at that truth quite yet, they're still operating under this myth that it's not me, it's you. And we hear a lot of that from leaders in their dialogue with Prax. And we've got to certainly vet that, but that is revealing an approach. It's that, well, I need my employees to improve, but I certainly don't need to improve. And what you find out is that leader is not respected, they're disliked, and their goals and vision are therefore unproductive and typically not met. And so we have to start with individual responsibility, and that's how all tides rise. I mean, it's exactly what you're talking about, Tyler.
It's funny as you describe that. I think of, some of the people I interact with, work with, that I coach, speak to, and again, whether it is the unlocking that themselves and transform an organization, or as I find, this is one of the things I talk about too, is like, man, to have a mindset, you have to reiterate it every day. It's kind of like you have to repeat the process. You have to shower. You have to brush your teeth every day. You can't just do it once and think you're good. And I think that as you're sharing, you walk into those organizations and it's like, are you leading yourself well every day? And if not, admit it, because everyone knows. And if you admit it and own it, man, that'll have a transcendental impact, because people are like, oh, I knew something was off. Hey, I'm struggling. And I think people are way more respective of that, as opposed to the guys like, no, I have it all figured out. You're the problem.
Yeah. Are you married?
Yeah.
Me too. And I
3 kids.
Oh, beautiful. I have 2.
Okay.
And I the reason why I love marriage analogies, I think there's such a impactful way for people to understand how we affect others and how we can affect a relationship. I think at my worst, I'll have thoughts that my wife needs to improve in order for our relationship to improve. And the reality is that 9 times out of 10, I need to improve, and then the relationship will improve.
Yeah.
And it's not only is that truthful, it's also where we have the most control. I don't control my wife. I don't control our kids. I don't control the stock market, the weather. I control my thoughts, my actions, my priorities. And so that's where I can really radiate change.
It's amazing. Again, coming back to that idea of growth. And are you willing to do the work to lead yourself, adjust your mindsets, reframe how you respond at times, but also understand, to your point earlier, it's like you ask a master and they don't have it all figured out. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to have it all figured. I can talk about this. You and I can talk about it. It's like, this is the way I need to be. And I can go from here up to my house and have lunch and, have an interaction with my wife that's not perfect. And like, yep, I didn't handle that right. It's just, I think the humility to be able to say that, rather than, and we see this in so many leaders, right? Again, that stress response is, I got to have it right all the time to lead this organization, instead of like, no, just admit you don't, and people will follow you.
And when a leader is under that stress, it's very easy to point the finger and blame, because it's much more difficult to say, well, what was my role in this problem? And it just turns out that our role is the part that that's the needle we can move. It's where we should control, where we should put our effort anyway, because it is futile to not only point the finger, but then we're expecting others to behave differently, which is more futile.
Here's just an interesting thought. Is the lack of self-leadership, and therefore that emotional reframing, is that a driver of burnout, do you think?
I think you've made a connection that needs to be highlighted more, and fairly unpopular, because it's so much more pleasant, Tyler, to blame our burnout.
Did we just hit a gold mine?
We did. I have been in conversations with folks that they pay to come to Prax for me to tell them things, and then I end up insulting them because I'm saying you're the problem. And I mean, this is a huge shock. They don't love that. And by the way, I don't love it either. I
Yeah.
don't love it
No.
either when I'm not showing up as my best self at work. It's much easier to say, well, the work environment is what needs to change. Oh, it's not that I slept 5.5 hours as opposed to 8. It's not that my diet is off. It's not that I've been sedentary for the last 2 weeks. It's not that I was unprepared. It's not my mindset. It's none of those things, of course. It's got to be all these other things.
Yeah.
So I think self leadership, the ability to, by the way, the definition of self leadership is the ability to influence yourself towards your goals, to influence yourself. So, self leadership, the foundation there is, have I led myself properly so that I can achieve X, Y, or Z? So, if the goal is to avoid burnout, who's responsible there?
Well, again, I think that here's the problem is, say you work in an office, right? You work in an office, you're in an office setting, and let's say, I'm just going to say 9 to 5. Okay. It
Okay.
could be 8 to 6. It could be, depending, whatever. It could be how 8 to 4, whatever you work, right?
Mhm.
If people don't know what you're doing to lead yourself outside of it, and they see, for example, say I'm up at 5 in the morning, I like to go to bed. Hey, if it's dark, I'm going to bed. If that means 8:30, I don't care.
Right.
There's nothing good.
Right.
Kids aren't doing anything. I'm going to bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
No reason to be a night owl just to be, right? But if the people around you look at what you do from afar and put that pressure on themselves, as opposed to, no, Andrew, you do you. Maybe you like to stay up till 10 and you get up at 7, but you can work within a framework that serves you best for what you need to do. Go rock it. As opposed to, I'm up till 11, I get up at 4, I'm continuing, I'm doing all this grind. No wonder people are burnt out if
I
you
know.
don't say, well, hey, every afternoon I take a 3-hour nap and, that's how I recharge, because that's what, if they don't know that, then you're putting false expectations on people.
Mhm.
And again, coming back to this self leadership burnout, it's like, yeah, that's why it happens.
I completely agree. The numbers are really grim too. 77% of professionals have experienced at least one symptom of burnout. This is according to the APA. That's my area of psychology. And what is it? It's excessive workload, emotional exhaustion, cynicism. But when I am creeping up or feeling any of those symptoms, Tyler, the number one thing that I look at first is my physical health. Number one, the foundation is physical health. So, am I sleeping? 35% of Americans are sleeping 7 hours or less. Terrible statistic. 41% are obese, and 47% report a completely sedentary lifestyle. So, if I'm feeling any of these things, I look there first. What am I doing? The foundation of my mental health is my physical health. So, am I sleeping? Am I eating right? And am I moving? If the answer is no to any of those, I got to fix that first, and that will lead to some of the other cascading effects that I'm looking for. And then I can move on to more detailed things. But I would say a high percentage of the time, if I'm feeling like I'm encroaching on burnout, that's the problem, and therefore also the solution. So if I'm feeling drained, I need
Yeah.
to fix my sleep, diet, and
Yeah.
movement first.
Well, again, to interject here, I think if you look at an organization, say you were, you mentioned this earlier, right? Somebody walks in, they're like, hey, need help with this. We've,
Yeah.
had people that have leave. They're saying it's burnout, whatever else.
Yeah.
Like, we just don't know. This is what the job is. And I'm like, again, comes back to, it's like, well, leader, what are
Yeah.
you doing
Right.
to, present a different perspective to them? What are you doing that maybe they can't do? And maybe what you're doing is preventing you from it. Hey, maybe let your people do those same things. What are you doing to, give them time off, to allow them to alter their work schedule, to make sure, hey, just go spend time with your family.
Yeah.
It's all right. Go do that to, whatever energizes you, go do, as opposed to, no, I expect your butt in the seat and grinding away just because that's what the job is. Like, you're not serving anybody by doing that.
No, and I think that's unfortunately still a secret. The best kept secret in leadership development is that well-being predicts performance. One of our core products at Praxis is called Pathfinder, and it's a 10-week course on well-being. And we get some pushback from leaders. So why would I spend money on an employee working on their mental, physical, or behavioral health. And then I start talking about values, and I completely lose some folks. And what ends up happening is the stickiest clients, the most loyal clients that we have sent their teams through Pathfinder. And what's so curious about is they come out and they're like, my relationship with my husband and kids has gotten way better, and my work has gotten so much better as a result of that, because they're getting closer to their aspirational values. And that is a beautiful predictor of performance. And when some of those things are off, when our well-being is off center, it affects everything else. And so the cure to burnout, I wouldn't say is necessarily well-being, but we've got to take care of our body and our mind. And more specifically, the root of all that is our values. And it's our family, our health, all of those things have got to come first. And when they do, and when leaders understand that we're human beings outside of our role, that's when cultures really, really thrive.
So I had this theory long holding that, and again, to this, sitting here and discussing more about burnout, is burnout often comes from people doing things that they are not gifted or uniquely specialized to do. And so I hold on to that because I do believe that causes a lot of burnout for people, and especially the stress. Hey, you need to do what you're not gifted to do, but you have to do it. But I think, as you mentioned, it's like, well, you can actually endure that if all the other things are going well. But if both of those are out of whack, dude, it's a, train wreck just waiting to happen. That is like a high speed accident that you can just watch coming. And I think it comes back to, you can laugh about the sleep and the health and all of those things. But man, that foundational point, if you have that in, you can deal with a lot. But if you don't have that there, you can be doing your absolute, what you're so fulfilled doing, but not feel healthy, and it doesn't last long.
I couldn't agree more. We've never met in person, Tyler, but you look like a fit guy, and you look like you care about that. And once you start practicing physical health, then you realize how incredibly imperative it is to all the other areas of your life.
Yeah. And even when you're off a little bit, you're like, I just told my wife last night, for whatever reason, it's getting cool. It isn't getting cooler here. It was supposed to be 100 today. Like the last 2 nights I was able to sleep and not wake up because I was hot. Like I have to take off the comforter. I'm like, it's amazing how much more energized and better I feel. Mm-hmm. And I don't know of any tweaks. I mean, I've wore a woo, but like all of those things, I can just like, I'm now questioning, why is it that all of a sudden, what has changed my diet? What have I, done little things there? It's to say, okay, I'm looking into it because it's a clue, as opposed to, oh, that's just the way it is. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the future of leadership. Do you think you're scratching the future of it, or do you look at it and say, and just philosophically, man, if we don't get this down, whatever the future is won't matter. Does that make sense? Is this the future of leadership, or, man, this is table stakes? If we don't get this down, there will be no future.
There's a current UFC champion, and he recently had this quote, and it's been rattling around in my brain. I'll share it. He said recently that practice is where I win my belt. The fight is just where I go to collect it. And I love that. And I'm answering your question because I think that's what's at stake. I think that people who operate at that level understand that it's not about outcomes and awards and recognition and applause or money. The people that really get it, they love the training. They love the process. Actually, number one golfer in the world, Scotty Scheffler, he was asked recently, what's one of your favorite things about golf? And he said, practice. And people were like, what?
Allen Iverson is just like, practice.
I know, which is it's so sad because what he could have been, and and by the way, I would argue that he did practice, but he was a
no,
bizarre.
it was so tongue in cheek in the
Yeah, that's
interview.
right.
It was,
He was a bizarre talent, but I think I'm answering your question in sort of a bizarre way.
no.
That I think that's what's at stake. I don't think people understand that universally, that you see someone who is really gifted at the piano and go, oh, they're just so talented. And you don't see the 19 years of calloused fingers that went into it. Athletes, musicians, artists, leaders, parents. I mean, gosh, being a great parent takes practice. Really, really, you got to have goals. You got to have feedback. You got to work on your technique, and every child's different. And if you just want to mail it in, you'll be an amateur. That's what you'll be. So I would say the future, our collective future, and this is way beyond professional organizational stuff, is we need to compete on that level as human beings. We need to embrace that suck, that practice, that process, and stop looking for shortcuts.
Man, this is totally. How old are your kids, Andrew?
3. I got started a little bit late, but
Okay.
I've got a 3 and a 6-year-old.
A 3 and a 6. Okay. I have a, probably about the time this airs, a 19, a 17, and a 16-year-old.
Okay.
Graduated
I'd love
high
some
school.
advice. I'd love some parenting advice when you finish what you're about to say.
Oh, well, so graduated high school, my daughter, 2 boys in high school, a junior and sophomore. And one of the things that I think about there is this idea of, what do you do it for? Are you doing it to collect the belt at the fight? Or are you doing it to win it before you ever get there? Because if you're doing it to win it before you ever get there, you may go collect it. But if you go to the fight just to collect it, you'll rarely ever at all collect it.
Agreed.
And, it's a little bit this idea of parenting, like say, practice. It's encouraging that on people. And, my kids are, my older son is a kicker and wants to be able to kick in the collegiate levels. And I just before this, as someone that's helping us said, hey, these couple colleges. And I stopped and thought about this as you were talking, as you shared that quote and about the future. If I'm a recruiter, tell me who likes to practice.
Oh, no doubt.
There's the grinders, there's those things. But even as we bring it back to this leadership, show me the leader that's reading books, not just the books on the shelves, but actually is reading them, is the guy that hands you a book. Hey, I just read this. I thought about you. Or, the leader that buys boxes of books to give to people, that goes to coffee to meet with you at the shop that you talked about. Even if he rode his bike before we got on air, you rode his bike and he hands you a book. Yeah. That's the one to follow, because that's the one that's willing to practice, as opposed to the one that's like, no, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. They say I do really well. I'm just going to keep going. Like, it's funny that, my space, like leadership, I've spent a lot of time with John Maxwell. Imagine you're familiar with John, right? Written a lot about leadership.
No doubt.
And it's interesting to me when I go and talk to people that are either in the leadership space or are leading organizations. And this is a guy that's written probably close to 40 million books now. Who's that? What's he write about? Who are you talking about? And it's like, okay, I don't know all authors, but if you're leading an organization, I would think you'd probably want to go to the proclaimed, not self, but proclaimed leadership expert.
Yeah.
Maybe a place to start.
Yeah.
And so, coming back to this is like, are you willing to do the work? Are you willing to grind away even when you didn't win the belt?
Yep. That's who I'll bet on too. Talent has a ceiling, but performance in practice does not. So I will absolutely bet on the leader, the musician, the artist, the parent, someone who enjoys and embraces that process, and they'll go farther. They absolutely will go farther. And that's something that's taken me a long time to learn. I played college soccer at a really small school and really underperformed, and I didn't have the mastery mindset that I have now. And there's no sense in going back and saying, I wish I would have had it then, because I didn't, but I have it now. And its application is universal. It doesn't matter the area of life that you want to improve. If you apply that mindset and those behaviors, it works.
Do you think you appreciate it now because you missed out? You can see what you're like, oh, if I'd only.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And I think too much talent can be um, can be a burden because you don't have to learn some of those skills. And I I, I look at I'm an NBA fan, so you look at Jokic,
Yeah.
and there isn't a GM that thinks he's a top 100 athlete. There isn't. There isn't a GM. They say he is the most intelligent player at anticipating what's going to happen next, and that was hard earned through practice. Hard earned through practice, and that's why he's revered and will go down as probably a top 5 player of all time. Certainly
Oh
already
yeah.
is in the NBA, and it's not because of he can jump or run fast.
No. I mean, it's, Larry Bird was much the same in regards to he was not a generational
No,
athlete. He was
no.
just did stuff that other guys didn't do and did it well and had a fight about him. Um, Here's an interesting concept as well. This idea of, to me, I think, the plight of great talent is sometimes you don't have to work as hard, right? You talk a little bit about that. I think you see that in leadership. And I think you see that when leaders go awry, when it goes wrong, is when their talent has been, capped, has been
Hmm.
maximized. And then they're like, what do I have to do? And I'm willing to pull any lever of outside lever, as coming back to our conversation earlier. Am I willing to pull the lever in here first? Am I
Right.
willing to do up here to learn to grow so I can move it from my head to my heart so I can serve people?
Hmm.
Man, that's hard work, as opposed to
Yeah.
I need to go hire someone else to do this. Oh, we need to change our values. We need to totally make this massive overhaul, as opposed to
Yeah.
I'm the lid of the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm I completely agree. What comes to mind, Tyler, is one of the biggest irritations that I have in leadership development as an industry, and I've referred to it. This is a derogatory term as clicks and claps. And what I
Okay.
mean by that is these companies that continue to rely on this asynchronous software. Go take this management course virtually and learn the skill, and then come back and tell me when you've clicked all the boxes, and therefore we've solved our organizational leadership development issue. So that's the clicks. And then the claps is hiring a inspirational keynote speaker to come and get everyone pumped up on a Friday, and then Tuesday comes and absolutely no changes occurred. So that's my derogatory term for stop doing that. Stop spending money, or at least the vast majority of your resources on those. And by the way, I'm all for, we offer a keynote at Prax. But I don't want to confuse our keynote with practice, because at best it's inspiration, but there's zero perspiration. You sat back in your chair and watched someone talk for an hour. There was no skill building whatsoever. And by the way, the research says that 20 minutes after this, you're going to forget 50% of this, and then in a week you're going to retain 5%. After that, if no practice is incorporated, 0%. So it's this perpetual problem in leadership development that we're not incorporating the principles of practice, which on a very basic level, Anders Ericsson talks about goals, effort, and
Mhm.
feedback. If there isn't goals, effort, and feedback, you ain't practicing. You're not. You're not. You need that trinity in there. And somehow we can wrap our brains around this, Tyler, with all the other areas that I just mentioned. Athletes know it, artists know it, musicians know it, psychologists know it. Tyler, you probably know it. But then when we get into these leadership positions, it's like, oh, we don't need that now. So somehow the rules don't apply anymore.
Everything gets strategic. Man, everything has to be so strategic, as opposed to I have a friend that's part of my community, was just a recent guest, who was a college football coach for 40 years. And we talked about it. It's like everyone wants to go to the X and O's, and that's what's going to make the difference. Like, give me the basic plays. If I get everyone to believe in it and buy in and do the hard work and master it, dude, we'll go through anyone until our talent no longer is able to beat somebody else that has better talent. That's what it comes down to. And so if your talent isn't maximized, that is only one thing to do, and that's the leader.
I
Plain
mean,
and simple.
That's exactly right. I think that's my, if I'm sitting down and if I've offended a company by saying that all you're doing is clicks and claps, which does happen, Tyler.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
hard to
no,
imagine me offending
I mean,
somebody,
yeah,
doesn't
no,
it?
no, I mean, hey, I'm an Enneagram 8. Okay. I'm a challenger. I get it. Cool, dude.
But like my message to the world is that the laws of improvement, mastery, and growth, they apply in leadership positions just as much. And somehow we lose our minds when it comes to being in a professional setting and expecting our people or ourselves to grow when all we're offering are single sessions. It's just
Yeah.
not enough.
Yeah. So, as we wrap up here and as we think about this and kind of empowering those that are listening in, what's one thing that, maybe someone's listening, right? And they're sitting here and saying either they're facing burnout or maybe something organizationally. Like, what would you do and encourage them to first start? Maybe, hey, if they're the CEO of an organization, they can start and transcend that down, but maybe they're a middle manager. Maybe there's someone that is, kind of mid-level. Like, what encouragement would you give that person?
Well, if I had to pick one thing, it would be seek feedback. Seek
Oh,
feedback.
that's
What did you
great.
think I was going to say?
No, it's great. I didn't know. So I love it. Yeah.
If I had a little bit more time, I would probably offer three or four things. But if I were to say, for you to get started on an improvement journey, a genuine improvement journey, professionally, personally, I think would be amazing as well. I would say you've got to seek out expert feedback first. It's going to help with your awareness of the issues that you're dealing with that you may be blind to or not at a spot where you're willing to accept. We talked about insecurities at the top of the show, and I think that's the biggest barrier to growth is either not knowing or knowing and not accepting. And that's number one. We got to crack open the door first. And the way to crack open that door, is feedback. So
Yeah.
once we are able to wrestle with that feedback, then we can put together a plan, create some meaning around it, and then start pursuing our development journey. But if there's no awareness first and acceptance of it, good luck. It's not going to happen.
There's an interjection that I think you'd probably, I don't know, is if I were to take that and I'd want to encourage someone, that doesn't mean your boss. That doesn't mean who you
Yeah,
report to. That means clients. That means peers. That means people. Like, seek it out there, because if you're not getting it already, you going and asking for it is probably not going to go well. But you can
agreed.
get feedback in so many different areas that can help inform where you need to grow as a leader. That isn't necessarily your boss, that probably isn't giving it. And again, if you're not getting it already, where you feel answered, like directed, they probably don't have the capability, the emotional, the intelligent emotions, the toolkit to do it. And that's
Yeah.
why you're sitting there saying, all right, I'm in the middle. I'm here. Why am I here?
I think that's beautifully said, Tyler. And I would just add one
Yeah.
thing, that there's experts all around us. And really, what you need, when I was first starting to play guitar, all I needed was someone who was a little bit better than me.
That's it.
And I could seek feedback from them because they had more knowledge, more skill. So first decide where you want to grow, and then there's gonna be someone around you who's further down
Yeah.
that can help you. So that would be that would
That's
be,
great.
I think, a tip, is that seek out expertise. If I'm my brother and I are getting into pickleball. If I'm trying to get better at pickleball, I'm gonna go ask someone who's better at pickleball than me, not
Yeah.
someone worse. If I
Yeah.
want to improve my marriage, guess what? My wife is willing to tell me where I can improve. And if I'm willing to listen, that's a great place to
Yeah.
start.
It's great. Awesome. Andrew, where can people learn more about you, Praxis Leadership, everything you guys are doing?
Well, you just said it. Praxleadership.com that's the Mecca. You can go to our website and you can get in touch with me, our team, anyone on our staff, and take a look at our programs as well. And we'd love to start a conversation with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for everyone watching on YouTube. Make sure to hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to get notified whenever we drop new content. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen, if you could rate and review this episode, it will help more people find impactful leaders like Andrew. Till next time, choose to lead with impact.